Good evening. My name is Susan Waterman, and it's an honor to welcome you to the second candidate forum of 2022, hosted by the Windsor County Democratic Committee. This evening, we'll hear from the Democratic candidates for Windsor County Sheriff, Thomas Batista and Ryan Palmer. The questions to be asked this evening were submitted by residents of Windsor County. Thank you to each person who took the time to submit their questions. And we'll also be selecting some questions from the YouTube live stream, so please get your questions ready. These questions have not been supplied to the candidates or the staff ahead of time, so they'll be hearing it alongside with you in real time. Facilitating along with me this evening is Al Alessi, who will be passing along questions from the YouTube chat, and Dottie Deans, who will be keeping track of each speaker's time to ensure that each candidate's opportunity for communication remains equitable. Please take a moment at the conclusion of this evening's forum to visit the link in the description below the video to make a donation to the Windsor County Committee. Your donations will help us to continue to do the important work we're doing in Windsor County. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into the questions. We'll start alphabetically. So Thomas, please take a couple minutes to introduce us to you and tell us about yourself.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. My name is Thomas Batista. My family moved to Vermont in 1980. We lived in Connecticut. I attended the Riverside Middle School and graduated from Springfield High School. I left to go away to college, earned my bachelor's in management, and came back to the area with my wife in 1991. From 1991 to 2002, I worked in the private sector. In 2002, I started with the Windsor County Sheriff's Department as a patrol deputy. I was on the road with the Windsor County Sheriffs doing patrol deputy items from traffic stops, handling complaints, mental health transports, DCF transports, anything that the department did, I was doing at that point. In 2011 to 2012, I think it was March, I moved into the administrative function in the office. I've been in the office since till 2022. I've got basically 20 years with the department. My experience has spanned from contracts. I am the law enforcement grants administrator to include highway safety, DUI, occupant protection, equipment grants. I write the grants, get the funding for the equipment and for the officers. I've also done grant writing for the Homeland Security, which provides us with radios, mobile data computers for the vehicles, cameras. I've also done the bulletproof vest grant for the department. Again, I've done administration from civil process, which is a very big area that we deal with, up into sheriff sales. I do writs of possession for the eviction process. I also do writs of attachment, writs of left oven. Again, I've had a very long career. I have 2 children, a son and a daughter, Amelia and Antonio. My son is in the Air Force. He just got back from deployment. My daughter, Amelia, just graduated college over at New England College with her master's in business management. And on Friday, she graduated from the Corrections Academy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And Ryan, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your thoughts about the office and why you're running.
All right, let's try that again. So my name's Ryan Palmer. I grew up in Windsor, went to Windsor High School. I'm a full-time certified police officer, currently employed with Ludlow. I started in 2006 in Claremont, and I've held all sorts of different positions. Detective, I'm certified school resource officer. I've run the firearms programs at 2 different departments. I'm union president. I've been union president at 2 different departments. I'm also a death investigator, so that means any suspicious or untimely deaths, I can investigate those. And I'm currently the chair of the Windsor Select Board. I serve as a Justice of the Peace in Windsor. I've been on the Board of Civil Authority, as well as the Board of Tax Abatement. So that's some of the public sector stuff that I've done. I'm also a veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan with the United States Air Force. And so currently I'm so I work for the Ludlow Police Department, as I said. I also do the SIU cases that come out of Ludlow, which are serious child abuse or sexual assault cases. I just finished up a child forensic interview course that I went through. And, I just went through the FBI lead as supervisors course. I've owned my own businesses. I have a, DJ business on the side. And, so one of the reasons, or the reason that I'm running for the office of Windsor County Sheriff is I want to transition the department from an agency that's solely focused on generating revenue and generating profit to provide more kind of all-encompassing holistic law enforcement services. I'm sure we'll get into that more, but kind of the motto of my campaign is to end policing for profit. And so thank you.
All right, thank you, Ryan. I appreciate both of your thoughts. So we'll dive right into the first question. So since we started with Thomas, we're going to start with Ryan for this first question. Have you ever switched political parties? And if so, why?
Well, that sounds like that was a question written especially for me. So yes, I ran as I've been, I suppose, part of the Republican Party up until the last year or so. I've become kind of disenfranchised with some of the ways that the Republican Party's gone. I mean, we've seen what's happened recently with the Roe v. Wade decision. The insurrection stuff that happened January 6th was obviously very, very concerning. And seeing how much more that the Democratic Party cares for people. And that seems, that's a big part of my campaign is helping people. Again, I tell people that you can't solve every problem with a hammer, and that's been the way of American policing in the last probably 50 years or so. And for me, it's about helping people. So yes, I have switched political parties. I believe that my police agenda is much more progressive and aligns much more with the Democratic Party. And so it's the main reason for switching. And I'm very upset with the amount of divisiveness in this country right now. I hope that I can bring some balance. I believe that the sheriff's office should be relatively apolitical anyways, but I'm hoping that I can bring some balance and kind of unite our communities.
All right, thank you very much, Ryan. Same question for you, Thomas. Have you ever switched political parties? And if so, why?
Well, I'm going to be quick on this one. I have not switched political parties because I have not run before. So again, I feel that you should vote for the best candidate that you feel represents your beliefs and your goals that you, the voter, would choose. So I'm going to leave it at that to answer the question.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the next question, that's going to be with you, Thomas. We're going to start.
Okay.
What is your general philosophy concerning policing? If it has changed over the course of your career, how and why has it changed? And if it hasn't changed, can you explain some professional instances that have reinforced your views?
Well, my philosophy for policing is, again, the police officers are to protect and serve. That's our oath to the public that we serve. As everybody knows, over time, everything changes. Policing has changed. My views on policing have always been pretty much the same. I did the job, started it to protect and serve the public. We have parameters that we have to operate in. My parameter is I would like to see much more community involvement from the people, because the sheriff in Vermont, as some other states, is the only elected law enforcement officer. So the public has a choice every 4 years to put your view as to what you want law enforcement in Windsor County or other counties to be. Again, I would like to use focus groups to get people together from the community, because I want to hear your input. That could be, I would do in-person meetings, Zoom meetings, as much that we can get people together, whatever forum that would encompass, so that we can get what the needs of the people are out. And then once we get the needs established, we can now sit down as a group, everybody together, and come up with solutions and how to fund the solutions for the programs that we're going to inevitably come up with. There are some situations out there like now with mental health, which is in my opinion, is a very large area that needs to be addressed. Again, that's my biggest thing. I think if we get everybody together, the people, law enforcement, especially the sheriffs, because we're a contractual agency, we can come up with a program and plans how to address the situation and other situations. We got to get diversity in hiring to get people, or else all of our plans will be for naught if we don't have the people to put them into play. I think my time is almost up, so I'm going to end with that.
All right. Thank you, Thomas.
You're welcome.
So Ryan, what is your general philosophy concerning policing? And if it has changed over the course of your career, how and why? If it hasn't changed, can you explain some professional instances that reinforced your beliefs?
So, as Tom said, I think everybody, as you grow and you age and you start to understand that the world is not black and white, that the world's often very gray, the more time that I've spent, not only just in law enforcement, but in the public sector and interacting with people, I've realized that we as police officers need to focus more on that protection, but the service aspect of it, right? We need to be there to help people. If you've seen my website, you see that I have developed this 3-pronged approach to policing, where the first part is dealing with at-risk youth or youth in general to try to change the trajectory of their lives, right? So by being involved early on in people's lives, because as police officers, whether we're county sheriffs, state police, local, we interact with people on so many different levels. And as Tom knows, I was a young kid riding around with him in the cruiser, 15, 20 years ago. But that had such a profound impact on my life. And if we can save 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20 kids and slow down the flow of criminals into the criminal justice system, that's step number 1. Step number 2, I tell people, I don't need to be a psychiatrist. I don't need to be a PhD. I don't need to be a drug and alcohol counselor, but I do need to be an expert in dealing with people in crisis. I'm an FBI certified crisis negotiator. I've been through Silver State Consulting's de-escalation training, and I'm working very hard with establishing relationships with our community partners to help people that want help. And the third part of it, as we've seen across the county, across the state, but particularly in Tom knows down Springfield, the amount of violent crime is going through the roof in Vermont, and we need modern proactive law enforcement that targets the people that are victimizing our society.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ryan. That what you just said kind of hits home with me. I live in Springfield, and one of the shootings was on my block. So, yeah, it's everywhere. Switching to transparency. So this one is going to start with you, Ryan. What would be your policy for investigating and acting on citizen concerns and complaints about staff?
First and foremost, establishing internal affairs protocols and using, there's some really good management systems for law enforcement. One of them is called Guardian. One of my mentors has a great deal of experience where you can track complaints on top of our CAD system, but establishing formal procedures for folks to be able to make complaints, but also not just make complaints, but formally recognize our officers when they do something good. But having a dedicated trained staff that are going to take IA or internal affairs complaints seriously, because no one hates a bad cop more than a good cop, okay? And circling back to that, I think more importantly, or not more importantly, but very important part of officer complaints that we're missing out is that we need to really put an emphasis on officer health and wellness, right? If you have angry cops out there that are suffering from the amount of trauma that we deal with law enforcement, the things at home that everyone else deals with, problems in your past, all these things. I've been very lucky as a veteran to deal with, the modern VA and understand that mental health is very important. So I want to make sure that I have the best trained officers, the healthiest officers, both mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and provide them with support from the administration so we don't have IA complaints, that our guys aren't out there generating those complaints. But when they do, we're going to have a substantial procedures in place to deal with that. And also, when we talk about transparency, body cameras are one of the first things I'm going to add within the first few weeks. So I'll leave it with that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ryan. Same question, Thomas.
Thank
What would be your policy for investigating and acting on citizen concerns and complaints?
Well, one of my first things, because it's one of my prongs that I would like to put in place, you have a civilian review board that all complaints would go to, and we already have an internal affairs investigator who would be working with the board on complaints. Vermont has a year ago they put a complaint program into place. Their program is basically a civilian review board at the academy. I'd like to do that at the Windsor County Sheriff's Department and have the forum. If somebody wants to put a complaint in, they could do it in writing, in person. They could do it online. It goes to the civilian review board. They would review all complaints, and the investigator would be with them so they can go over the complaints. If it requires further investigation, we already have an internal affairs investigator. He would handle that. The sheriff would have, the sheriff, but have nothing to do with it. That's strictly between the board and the investigator, because the transparency is the people are the ones that should be reviewing us, the police, not us reviewing ourselves. Doesn't work very well that way. So that's one of my programs that I would put in place. We do have cruiser video right now, but again, the video would be available to any of the investigators for any complaint, as standard as it is now. If somebody complains, there's video, we would pull it and give it to the investigator, and it would go be investigated. And the findings again would go back to the board would come up with their findings. If it requires, it would go to the sheriff for a suspension or whatever they're deemed necessary. That would be approved by that board. Again,
Okay.
certain things would have to go to the academy before we finish. But again, if we have our own internal review board of civilians reviewing it, the academy is probably going to basically just say, yes, you've already done what we were going to do.
Okay. Well, thank you, Thomas. On that note, you mentioned that you would allow people to make concerns via online.
Mhm.
But currently, there's not much of a Windsor County Sheriff Department website. So is that something that you would add, a website? And if so, what information do you think should be on it?
We do need a social presence. We should put what the Windsor County Sheriff's Department does. I'm not saying everyday operations, but have a forum that you could ask questions. We can put things out to the public, the general public, like say quick or ticket events, drug takebacks, some other community-sponsored events, seatbelt checkpoints, etc. Something that's available right now. We don't do that right now. If I was sheriff, that would be something that I would be getting on top of right away, to have a social platform so people can talk to us.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Susan, can I follow up on that?
Absolutely.
So, although I think the idea of civilian review boards is maybe great in theory.
If you want to follow up on the website idea, yes, but I
Oh,
don't
I
want to
can't.
turn it
Roger,
into a
Roger,
debate between the two of you. But if you want to say something about the follow-up question I had about the website, feel free to comment on that.
Yes, ma'am. So day one for me, if anyone's been following my campaign, I think you see that I've got a fairly strong social presence. I think not just having a website, but newsletters, a social presence, Instagram, Facebook, all those things where the community feels more connected and involved. But certainly, I mean, these are week one things for me, getting those up and running.
Okay. All right. So next question. What is and I know both of you have kind of already touched on this, but what's your philosophy regarding partnering with social workers, mental health and other crisis professionals, and victim advocates? So this one, I think we're going to be starting with Thomas.
Okay, I'm good to go.
Okay, you're good to go.
Yes, I would like to have a crisis intervention team so we can start taking a proactive look at what's out there. Currently, if you looked at the 2021 results for the mental health in Windsor County, We had 843 people that were adult on mental outpatient staff servicing, I guess they call it. We had 357 that were in a community rehab program, and 903 of these people were unassigned. So we had a total of 2,103 people having some kind of mental health crisis. My understanding is some local VSP barracks, the Royalton and the Westminster one, do have a crisis person available for calling. When people call in and we respond to a crisis, they're available. The problem that I see is we're always in a responding mode. We're not being proactive. By having a team, an unmarked car, could be a deputy and a worker, we can put lists together. We know who these people that are high risk, at risk, that need to be, let's say, monitored, create a visitation schedule for them, whatever the frequency, could be weekly, could be bi-weekly, depending on what they need, and get that condition to seeing these people. And hopefully that would start to a different program, and we could potentially get them help before a crisis occurs and reduce the recalls for crisis. Because again, I'm giving you numbers that HCRS and the Vermont Health puts together. We can't, no idea what the towns do, Springfield Police, Hartford Police, Ludlow, Wethersfield. They could be just a domestic disturbance, dispute. We don't know what the mental health, I'm sure there's a lot of mental health going on with that.
Okay.
That would be my plan, would be to get a proactive team out there. We get some deputies, we can get the funding. There's plenty of grant funding to fund the programs. That's not the problem. It's again, finding the people that are qualified to do the program. That's our biggest thing.
Okay. Thank you very much, Thomas.
You're welcome.
Ryan, same question for you. What is your philosophy regarding partnering with social workers, mental health, and other crisis professionals?
Yeah, so like, again, it goes back to that second tier of my approach to policing is helping people who want help. From day one, I've been saying that I want to introduce a social worker, victims advocate into the sheriff's department, whether that's contracted through HCRS, which Windsor, when I was there, shared a social worker with Springfield. Both barracks, Royalton and Rockingham have social workers. But I think it's not just about adding the social worker to the program, but training your officers to be able to respond to folks in crisis, to deal with kind of more mental health maintenance things where you see somebody in trouble, and being an expert and guiding them to those partner agencies that you already have well-established relationships with. For me, I want to establish a countywide multiple disciplinary team that focuses on not just mental health, but addiction, some of these other social issues that all kind of go hand in hand. But day one, I think there's some restructuring that probably would happen at the sheriff's department, and making room for a victims advocate social worker that not just works with the folks on the outside, but helps our people become better at dealing with folks in crisis. And again, making sure that our folks are the best trained officers that we can have out there, and bring in de-escalation training, mental health awareness training above and beyond what we're seeing mandated by the state already.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. So now we've got another question regarding transparency. And this one's for Ryan first. Ryan, how do you plan to increase transparency and oversight of the actions of the sheriff's department? I realize this is something you've already talked about, but I think it's important. So if you want to expand on your previous statements.
Yes, ma'am. Body cameras, body cameras, body cameras, and making sure that every cruiser every cruiser on patrol has cameras. And then again, it goes back to training, preparing the best officers out there, and making sure, again, that we have supervision, but ensuring that our officers are the highest trained level or highest trained officers in the state is going to really cut down on officer involved complaints and these type of things. But again, having a formalized complaint process where citizens can make formal complaints, whether in person, through any sort of telecommunication, and then make sure that stricter policies are adhered to, and that you have trained, formally trained internal affairs investigators. But again, reaching out to the community, being involved in the community, and making sure that we have body cameras on every cop that's out on the street.
Okay, thank you very much, Ryan. Thomas, back to you. How do you plan to increase transparency and oversight?
Again, I think we hit on it earlier. I like the civilian review board because again, it's going to be comprised of the community, whatever the cross section is. The people can submit their complaints, could be whatever forum. We've already got a formalized process, but whatever forum you want to do, it could be just an email that says something happened, date, time, whatever it is. I think that should go to them. They would review it. We have our own trained internal investigator that would be there with them handling the complaint. Again, some complaints may go nowhere. They may feel that the complaint is unwarranted. What their response is, would maybe send a letter. We've reviewed it. Thank you very much. That would be up to the board. But again, the transparency, many of the cruisers have cruiser cams. We're looking at new systems now that are going to actually have a video component body camera with it. Again, all of that would be available to the review board and anybody that needed it. It's going to be all available. I think that's the transparency comes when a separate entity looks at what we're doing. And again, as my opponent said there, training, that's how we would get, there may be something that we need to have more training in. Could be de-escalation, could be whatever. But that's where we would pick that up, and that would help us out in the future to see what trainings are needed for the department, if that would come to play.
Okay.
I think that's pretty much what I would do if I was sheriff.
All right, thank you, Thomas. So we have a question from YouTube. This comes from Liz Palm. Liz Palm, I'm sorry, I don't know what your name is, but it's Liz Palm. What is your plan to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion within the department? And I think she probably means staff. And so this one's for Thomas first.
So again, what I would like to do is get more diverse in our hiring practices. Right now, there's different venues, colleges, campuses, et cetera, that we should go to. I also would like to have the focus group come up. That's why I want community involvement to come to the table and potentially bring candidates to the table, because now that the transparency is going to be there, you're going to be representing the community, and we'd like to have community involvement in the hiring process, not just necessarily the sheriffs. So you may have a candidate that the community wants to bring. We want to get the community involvement and put a board together to hire and screen people. A lot of times there's 2 or 3 boards of, could be mostly, usually it's police officers. Get a board of a couple of people. Could be a retired police officer, could be someone from the community, could be a local business person. Ask the candidates the questions, come together, because I want you to do that. That's the whole purpose of diversity, is get people from the community to get involved and want to get involved to protect and serve their community. Again, you guys all know what today's economy has with all the jobs that are out there. Everybody's looking for people. Is my answer the answer? I think I do have a good answer, but remains to be seen. If I'm sheriff, that's what we'll put into play.
All right, thank you, Thomas. Same question to you, Ryan. What is your plan to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion within the department?
Big thing for me is being out in the community and changing from the idea that we're just out there sitting in a cruiser 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, writing people tickets. It's establishing a community-oriented policing agency that's out there and organically building candidates, right? That you're out there, you're a mentor, you're a junior high football coach, you're involved in the schools, you stop in, you read books to build a kind of robust school resource program, where again, we're shifting away from just writing people tickets, being unapproachable, to being assimilated into the community, because at the end of the day, we're just community members, right? And then I think actively pursuing, we have several wonderful colleges in the area, right? Actively going there, recruiting, finding folks that still have that desire to serve, because there's plenty of people out there that do want to serve. Policing just gone through a rough patch in the last several years. I think that a lot of it, at the end of the day, we'll find there was some serious progress in the modernization and the progression of American policing. And for me, it's going out in the community and finding those candidates, suggesting to one of these young kids, hey, you ever thought about being a cop? You ever thought about serving your community? I know you like sports. I know you're involved in school, and building those relationships. Most of the towns that the sheriff's department currently serves, folks are just sitting in the cruisers 12 hours a day, and there's some reasoning behind that. But I'd like to see our staff get out there. I'm the sheriff, be involved in the community. And I think in that sense, kind of, if you build it, they will come. Folks will kind of migrate to your department and want to serve their community in that way.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. So we've got another question from YouTube that I also had a similar one on my list. So I'm going to go with this. And this comes from Sally. Will you prioritize Windsor County Community Services versus contracts that are financially beneficial to the sheriff's department, which consequently are beneficial to the sheriff? And this is going to be for Ryan first.
So for those folks that don't know, sheriff's departments in Vermont are kind of a quasi business, and Tom can probably explain a little bit, even better than I can on that. But there's very small amount of funding from the state that basically pays the sheriff's base salary, and for a couple of state paid deputies, there's a small county budget. But the majority of the sheriff's budget comes from contracts, right? So the current setup of the sheriff's department, you're never going to get away from contracts, but it's the focus, the scope of the contract. And for me, it's evidence-based policing. It's focusing on outcomes versus output, not just putting a dollar on an hour and saying, we're going to sit here for 12 hours a day. And again, write tickets, back to that policing for profit, generating revenue for towns. It's going, we're going to provide you with modern, professional, community-oriented police service. And we're going to focus on building relationships in the community and responding for calls and crime reduction. So yes, Sally, my goal is to shift the scope of the services that we're providing. But again, it's, unless there's a serious change with the legislature and how sheriff's departments are set up and funded, it's always going to be contractually based. But what's the scope of that contract? Okay.
Well, thank you very much. With that in mind, I realize that that's part of the way that's funded. But are there grants available to focus more on community versus just relying on the contracts for the funding?
Was that for me?
Yeah. Just follow up for.
So yes, there's all sorts of money out there. Some grants are much more cumbersome than others. I think that as we look into, again, for me, shifting the focus of just revenue generation to community-oriented modern policing, it's going to be creative with our funding. But I can tell you from the conversations I've had with selectmen in some of these towns, they're willing to pay. They want full service law enforcement. We all know taxes are extremely high in Vermont, but I've seen this dynamic shift in Vermont in the population where folks want to feel safe in their homes. They don't want 40-minute, half-hour response times from the police. They want reasonable response times. They want to feel safe in their communities, and they want police that are out there, not just writing guys running late to work or speeding on their way to Killington. And again, I'm not trying to minimize the importance of traffic enforcement, speed enforcement, and public safety. It's a part of the puzzle, but to me, it's a small part of the puzzle, and there's so much more that we need to focus on.
Okay. Same question for you, Thomas. And I'll read it again. Will you prioritize Windsor County Community Services versus contracts that are financially beneficial to the sheriff's department, which consequently are beneficial to the sheriff?
Well, the answer that I would give to that is the sheriff's department, again, is a contractual agency. So we get very little state funding from the state and a little bit from the county, which pays for basically administrative staff, equipment, and some training. So I would like to say there'll be a balance that I would try to go between contracts that we have and helping the community out for the programs that they need. That's why I would like to have the focus group come together and say, here's what we need and how we can solve that. Again, our biggest problem is like everybody else. It's a manpower problem. We're a contractual agency, so we have to generate contract revenue to keep paying people. And again, we can go out and apply for grants to help these different entities in partnership with them. And that's great. We can do that. I mean, I'm a grant writer myself. We can all do that. Again, our biggest problem, again, is going to be where are we going to get the people? And if how do you reallocate your resources? You got to have a balance. So I could take some of the full-time guys maybe and go to do the more mental health, people that are experiencing some kind of crisis. I shouldn't say mental health, just a crisis of some time. Do more crisis intervention, provide more training, partnership up. We can do that. Again, the problem is going to be the balance, is we got to balance this out and say, so much money's got to come in because we still got to have cars, we got to have equipment, we got to be able to pay for training for these people. The grant may reimburse some of the expenses and maybe some of the training, but again, it's going to be a whole reallocation and a whole restructuring of what we're doing. But we still have to be financially solvent at the end of the day, because we can't go to the taxpayers and say, I'm sorry, this year our budget now went from 2 million to 4 million. We need an extra 2 million. So thanks for helping us out. It doesn't work that way. We can, whatever we generate in contracts is the money that we have to run the organization. And we can get all the grants in the world that we want, but at the end of the day, we all know that somehow there has to be some sustaining ability for the entity to have some kind of funding. If we don't, we won't be around.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. I know this is kind of this is something that I'm going to ask you, but it's from Kurt Dermody, and unfortunately, it kind of ties into what you were just saying. Is, you know, you only have so much money, and then you also only have so much pool for your officers. But with holding a higher standard and commitment from officers, how are you going to fund the salaries to reflect that?
Is that to me?
It's to you.
Okay. Well, again, we can fund higher salaries because we can partnership and contract with different organizations. We can get grant funding. A lot of the grant funding that you're going to get usually provides for wages, some training, some mileage, etc. We can go to other private sources and contracts and get different grants to fund the programs that are more of a private sector. I would like to see a fundraiser come on board to help out, have a separate entity that would have the people, that's why I said the committees come together. You're going to decide what's needed. We can fund sources through a different entity that we can contract with that would be in line with what you're saying, to have these sources funding. And we can say, we need to charge X, Y, and Z and get reimbursed for these expenses to cover our portion and help out. So there's different things that we can do and set up. It's not going to happen day one, I can tell you that. We're looking at down the road and getting people involved and setting the system up. But as I'll say this, I think once we get, because there's no county government right now in Vermont, we're kind of being a quasi county. Once we get rolling on it, we might even be the model for the state. We could be.
That would be great. So how many, and this is for either one of you, how many full-time staff are there in the sheriff's department currently?
Maybe I should answer that one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so right now the Windsor County Sheriff's Department currently has 18 sworn personnel. They're not all full-time, that's including part-time and full-time. We have 2 civilian staff. Basically, there's probably around 10 full-time deputies. Out of the 10, we also have 2 state paid deputies whose responsibility is to transport prisoners. So that's basically our whole staff right now. It's the lowest that I've seen it, and I started in 2002.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think to be fair, I'm going to have the next question start with Ryan.
Okay.
Ryan, what services provided by and roles filled by the department do you plan to prioritize?
Policing, modern policing, being out in the communities, The sheriff does a lot of different things. I think it's being creative with those state paid deputies, using them to provide free civil standbys is the term that we use in the industry for domestic violence victims, using those state paid deputies to, work with some of our HCRS and some of our other mental health agencies out there to give them kind of free backup. And then putting my guys out on the road, my folks out on the road, and being community oriented police officers, being involved in those communities, finding out what the problems are, finding out what's the causation of those problems, and then focusing on that. Some of the conversations that I've had with residents and selectmen in some of the towns that the sheriff's currently covers is that, they used to focus a lot on tickets. Now that's not even really the focus. And they're certainly not working to reduce crime proactively, proactive criminal enforcement, focusing on, again, people that are victimizing society. So that's my major focus. There's a lot of other parts and pieces that the sheriff's department does, and Tom can speak to that more if people have questions. But really on the law enforcement community policing side, that's my main focus. All the civil stuff, the traffic control, those are things that, yes, we'll still do, but really shifting this to a modern law enforcement agency from just a place that writes tickets.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. Same question for you, Thomas. What services provided by and roles filled by the department do you plan to prioritize?
Again, I would like to prioritize getting more community involvement through obviously the community. Again, I've got to keep in mind there's certain things that the sheriff has to do, and civil process is one of the biggest things that we have to do. I don't have a choice on the matter. That's by statute. So we average anywhere from 1,400 to 2,400 pieces of process every year that we serve. Again, right now we're low because of COVID. Next year that could change. So we have one deputy that's dedicated to that. We do provide contract services to towns. Again, we would like to do 24-hour service. That's definitely a possibility to do. We could structure things that way, but again, we're coming back to the manpower issue. We have right now 18 full and part-time deputies. Now that doesn't mean that we have 18 people that tomorrow morning we could send out. No, some are on vacation. Some may only want to do traffic control. Some might only want to do escorts, whatever it is. So again, the biggest thing is we need to get that diversity and get the manpower, and it's law enforcement across the nation. Vermont is not selected out in this, singled out in any way. We need to get that out there to get the policing services to the towns. Some towns, as my opponent has said, they specifically want to target speed enforcement because they got a speed problem. Okay, that's up to the town, the contract, and the select board. Select boards can change at any point in time and say, we want you to provide full services to the town. Okay, we can do that. But again, full services cost money when we have to go to court, follow up on cases. And sure, we can do it. But again, it's the limited resources that all the entities that are together have. I think again, and this is just my feeling, I haven't seen 30 seconds yet, is if we can come together as a group, all of us, we can try to pull those resources and maybe solve some of these problems. But again, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. It's going to take everybody working together to get to a goal that everybody will be satisfied with. Hopefully that answered your question.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Hey, Susan.
Yes.
I just, for our viewers, could Tom just clarify what civil process is? You and I know what it is, but it might not be a word that people understand.
Sure. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. So civil process is required by the sheriff. So any kind of paperwork that comes in, it could be for an eviction process. It could be a small claims, anything that somebody would like us to serve for them. The sheriffs are required to serve civil process. And just so everybody's clear, there's a $50 service fee per piece of process that is served, okay? Out of that $50 fee, the state gets 15%. So everything that we serve that we charge a $50 fee quarterly 15% goes to the state. So it's it's not a free service. Everybody has to pay for the service and the state gets their portion of it. Does that clarify, hopefully?
It does. Yes. Thank you very
Okay.
much. So
You're
basically serving papers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. What training specifically do you think should be essential for Sheriff's Department staff? And Thomas, we'll start with you.
Well, I guess when you say to me staff, are you talking deputies or are you talking just our non-sworn civilian staff? I'm going to assume it's deputies. So our biggest training, again, should be the de-escalation training, which we are heavily involved with right now. We have a lot of de-escalation training that we're using in dealing with people in a mental health crisis and other crises. We would like to do that, but again, we're the Sheriff's Department, so we got to fund 18 people for training. So that comes from the county pays for the training at this point. And again, when you start we have a mandatory 30 hours of training every year to do. You multiply that times 18 officers, and everybody wants to do different training. But I think that's our key right now, which is what we've been focusing on. We've done a lot of the basically de-escalation training because we have a lot of contact that not necessarily police departments do different things. We're dealing with evictions on a regular basis. We're dealing with people coming into court. We provide security for the courts. So those people are agitated, and there's a lot of people that we deal with for that. Again, I think by us doing that, I've been there since 2002. I cannot recall of any complaint that we've had for any excessive force or injuries to any person that we've done anything to.
Okay. Thank you, Thomas. Same question for you, Ryan. What training do you think should be essential for Sheriff's Department staff? And to clarify, yes, that would be the sworn deputies.
The FBI Crisis Negotiator School, it's a 1-week school, was absolutely hands down the best class that I've taken in my law enforcement career. I became very, very good friends with the instructor, and understanding how to deal with people that are in crisis. This was taught by 30-year FBI hostage crisis negotiators. And again, I became very good friends with the instructor. So very early on in my tenure, if I get elected, I'm going to have him up here and host the training. One of the things that I've done in my career at Ludlow is bring in national level instructors because it cuts into the cost of the training. When you're a host agency, you get a lot of free seats. I've done that a couple times. Tom came down to one of my trainings. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but so bringing these national level trainers to Vermont, it's like people treat training like, oh, it's this magic code how to unlock it. Well, we bring the trainers to us. We host these classes. We train our people to become trainers. But the absolute best piece of training that I've had that I use every day in my career, not just in a crisis, but was the FBI Crisis Negotiator course. And that absolutely translates well to every single interaction I have throughout the day. It's not just as a law enforcement officer, but in my personal and other professional life. So that's probably training number one. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you. This question actually comes from our timekeeper, Dottie Deans, and she wanted to know what support you would have for your sworn staff for mental health and their general well-being. And we'll start with Thomas for Ryan. Ryan, we're going to start with you on this one.
So I've been kind of digging into this over the last 3 or 4 months. I've had conversations with 3 different mental health providers. And I think the answer to that question is have somebody on retainer, but also culturally shift from this idea that getting help, seeking help, being involved in therapy or counseling is wrong. There's still a lot of stigma in our career field towards mental health, right? I've heard stories of folks that have been told, well, don't tell anybody you're seeing a psychiatrist. and they're going through a really, really rough patch in their life. Again, you can't be exposed to the type of trauma that we are. And I won't jump into what those things are, but you can imagine on a continual basis without mental health maintenance. So for me, it's a cultural change, telling my people, you know what? It's okay to go talk to somebody. And in fact, if I can't mandate it, I certainly can encourage it and have somebody on staff. And I have 3 different providers that I've been working with on this issue, Dottie. So thank you for asking the question. But that goes back to my focus on improving officer health and wellness, because again, we look at some of these crazy, terrible things that happen in the national spotlight, right? And I think that if those cops were in a much better place emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, felt supported by their administration, some of those things, I don't know that they would have happened. So, your answer, Dottie, is have people on staff and change that culture, and hopefully be the kind of flagship for mental health support for law enforcement for the entire state.
All right. Thank you very much, Ryan. Thomas, same question to you. What would you do to support and ensure that the mental health and well-being, general well-being of the staff is better and keeps getting better?
Well, again, we currently do have a person for all our insurance. We do have a person that's on retainer for mental health for us, for the department. So obviously after a major incident, some deputies and some people they have used the service, which has been very beneficial to them. It's available to all the deputies. So if they need it, again, can't tell you how many have used it because it's confidential, and that goes to them. I would say, in addition to that, deputies need to have time off, doing their own things, getting back to whether it be working out, going for a walk with a dog. They need to have the time off to do and get back into their normal mode from the work mode, because we do deal with very critical things on a daily basis. A lot of time off is a key. I like to have 2 weeks off for the deputies. That would be where you go away and recharge your batteries. But we also want you to go work out if that makes you feel better, so you're in better health. A lot of gym memberships. A lot of them like to go to the pond, walk around the reservoir, and different things. So it'll be individually beneficial for them to hopefully do something to recharge their batteries. But again, in the long run, it's going to be up to the individual deputies what they need. Again, the resource for us as a sheriff or the department would be, if you need something, tell us. If you tell us, we're going to find the resource, even if we don't have it, and we're going to take care of it for you. We've done this in the past, and it's worked out very well for us.
Well, thank you, Thomas. I think that's a good question to end on. I think that that's very important. I also work in a very stressful, emotional job, and it's important to have outlets for your own mental health. So that wraps it up. We've covered a lot of ground, but we still have reserved time for both of you to have a little time to talk to finish up our evening. So in reverse order from the introductions, we're going to start with Ryan. So Ryan.
All right, thank you. So for folks out there watching who are going to watch this election is incredibly important in regards to changing the way rural law enforcement is provided in Windsor County. And I think this position, the sheriff of Windsor County, being an elected position, I think for me personally, I envision it a role that you're working with the legislature, you're working with towns, you're constantly seeking to improve law enforcement, not just in Vermont, but across the entire state. In this election, although we haven't really paid much attention to the sheriff's election, probably in years past, right? This to me is an incredibly important election. If you want a change to community-oriented policing, if you want serious change at the sheriff's department, I think I'm your candidate. Again, full-time certified law enforcement officer. I've got a ton of investigative, proactive policing experience, school resource officer experience, and some vision to really change the way business is done there. I want to be more transparent. I want to make sure body cameras are out there, and this idea of policing for profit, where it's a family-run business, has to change. So again, thanks everybody for attending. Thank you for the Windsor County Democrats for putting this on. Feel free to reach out. My website's ryan4windsor.com, spelled out. All my contact information is there. So please reach out with any questions or comments. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. All right, Thomas, if you want to have a couple minutes to wrap up and tell us a little bit more.
Thank you very much. Again, thanks for having me tonight. Again, I'd like to just say to the public, thank you for watching. Please, as my opponent says, when it's time to vote, make your vote count. Doesn't matter to me who you vote for. Please make your vote count. That's the biggest thing. Again, I've been with the department for many years. I know what statutorily we have to do. I have an idea of what I would like to do as sheriff. Would like to get the community together, see what the community sees as their primary goals that we should be doing, and then we can go and see how to implement those plans. Again, some of those plans might even be to augment some police departments that are understaffed or are having issues. I think the public is the one. Transparency comes by involvement and everybody talking to, getting as a group, talking, seeing what's going on, working together so that you have an active voice and you can see the results of what's being done and what's being requested. Again, I've been doing the department for many years, primarily in grants. So there are a lot of funding opportunities that are available to us that could help out with other programs that we could do. As sheriff, I would put that first on my list, and in the first few days, we can make things happen. I want to thank you very much for the Windsor Democrats for allowing me to come on your website and participate in tonight's debate. Thank you very much. And thank everybody for coming.
All right. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, both of you. And I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to you both. A call to public service and running for office takes commitment. It's not easy. So thank you for answering that call and working hard for Vermonters in Windsor County.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you to all of you who joined us this evening on YouTube. If you have feedback, please let us know. And if you found this evening's forum helpful and informative, which I hope you have, please follow the link in the description to donate to the Windsor County Democratic Committee, because your donation will help us to ensure that Democrats and those who uphold, defend, and ensure our values and rights are elected up and down the ballot in November. Please join us on May 23rd to hear from the candidates for Secretary of State, and on June 13th for a forum with the Vermont candidates for the U.S. Senate. Stay safe and have a good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. You too.
Okay, so we are no longer live.